Welcome back to Plant a Dye Garden. This is a video I didn't really want to make. I ran into some issues with my seedlings, but I think there's going to be some good information here about problems that can come up and troubleshooting. I'll get into all of that in this video. This is what the seedlings looked like at 3 weeks, and they don't look too bad, but a few days later they started damping off. In retrospect, I think that their slightly yellow color might have been a clue that they were not as robust as I had hoped. At this point, I was happy because I could see the first true leaves. This was kind of the next milestone that I was looking for. You can see them well on this marigold. Those toothy leaves are the true leaves. And what else? These hollyhocks you can see down in the middle, some leaves coming up. The basil, coreopsis, and scabiosa. However, I did suspect they needed more light. I think they look a little bit yellow, but it's only been 3 weeks, and so I'm going to see if I can let them grow for at least 1 more week before I harden them off. Over the course of a few days, I transitioned them outside, and they were looking okay, but they weren't really growing, and so I decided to pot them up into some cups, which were a little bit bigger, and they would be in potting soil and hopefully better conditions for growth. However, this is when I discovered their true weakness. Damping off isn't always readily apparent, but when I potted these up, I discovered thin, weak stems. And you can see here that eventually the plants just were not even able to hold themselves up. Hands down, the number one reason cited for damping off is insufficient light, and the second one is poor airflow. Insufficient light leaves the plant weak and susceptible to the fungus that causes damping off, and lack of airflow also makes for conditions which the fungus likes. I'm going to show you some modifications to my setup that I've made for better sprouting, but for now I want to also talk about another issue I ran into, which is poor seed viability. Although many kinds of seeds are viable for several years, it turns out that not all of them are. Japanese indigo, also known as Persicaria tinctoria, does not stay viable for very long, and it's best to use seeds that were collected in the previous year. This explains why my first batch of indigo seeds never sprouted. So I got some fresher seeds, and when I planted them, they came up within a week. Unfortunately, I came out one morning to discover that all the heads of the indigo sprouts were missing. And this remains a mystery. I don't know why they suddenly disappeared. Perhaps something ate them? So I ended up planting indigo for a third time. I'm going to show you how I've revised my setup, but before I do that, don't forget to subscribe so that you can follow this dye series all the way through and find out what happens with the dye garden. Clearly, if I was going to have a dye garden, I was going to need to start a new batch of seeds. And since the weather had warmed up since the beginning of this project, I decided to create 2 batches of seeds. One will be started indoors and the other outdoors. If you've been following along with this series, you may notice that here I'm using cups for the seedlings instead of seed cells. And what I found with the seed cells is that the seedlings quickly outgrow that small space, and I wanted something that the seedlings wouldn't outgrow quite so quickly. Each cup has a small hole in the bottom, and the cups are set into a plastic tray, and this allows me to still do the bottom watering instead of overhead watering. This is the new batch of seedlings at 12 days old. I'm going to back up here and you can see I've modified my setup a bit. If you look underneath the tray, there's a stack of 2x4s. I needed to lift the seed tray up closer to the light. And you can also see to the top right, I have a small fan to help with airflow. I moved half of these indoor seedlings to the outdoors at 12 days, and I'm going to see how they do being hardened off a little bit sooner. Of course, I wouldn't be able to do this if it was cold outside, but it is June as I do this, and so the weather is perfect for new seedling. I'm starting these out in dappled sunlight so they can get used to the intensity of the outdoor sun. And they're only outside for a few hours the first day, and I'll work them up to a whole day over several days. And then from there, I'll leave them out for 24 hours and then move them into the full sunlight. These are the seedlings that I'm starting outdoors from the very beginning. There's a plastic tray there. They're in full sun, and they've been slower to sprout. However, I think the seedlings look more robust. That's a scabiosa, and I just realized I forgot to plant some indoors. Some coreopsis, very small right there. There's some back here, and indigo. I think the indigo just looks, the leaves are darker than the indoor ones. I think they're just appreciating more light. And basil. The basil looks about the same. So I'll be really interested to see how this compares with the indoor seeds. I started them all at the same time. So what are my takeaways from all of this? First of all, provide more light. Set the seed tray 4 to 6 inches from the light source and leave the light on for at least 16 hours. And if it seems like it's not enough, go ahead and leave it for 24 hours. Or you can start your seeds outdoors. When starting seeds outdoors, pay close attention to the soil moisture. The soil can dry out faster outside. And of course, the low temperatures need to be above 65 degrees. Good airflow helps prevent the fungus that causes damping off, so find a small fan that can be set near the seedlings. It's also helpful to use fresh seeds, especially for Persicaria tinctoria, also known as Japanese indigo. And finally, planting the seeds in a 6 to 8 ounce paper cup allows ample room for root growth. I hope this video helps you start your own dye garden. In the next video, we'll do a comparison to see how the seedlings inside and outside are doing. Until then, please like and subscribe. And be sure to download the dye garden plan. It's in the description below. There's a 4x8 and a 4x4 foot plan.